Now that we've gotten out of the way how to expose our images and how to adjust our white balance, let's take a look at now how to use these new vibrance and saturation sliders down here to really fine-tune our colors inside our images. So I'm going to come back over here to the left, and I'm going to double-click to expand our preview content window over here. And I'm going to select shades.dng from the images here on the left. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close this back up simply by double clicking just so I have a bigger preview of this image. And what I'm going to do now is show you exactly the difference between vibrance and saturation and why you want to use vibrance versus saturation for certain situations. So a lot of people, when they're working with images and they think that there needs to be an enhancement in the colors, they will go ahead and they'll bump up the saturation of the photograph simply because that's one of the commands in Photoshop that we often use, and it's a lot easier to use this saturation method a lot of times inside of Photoshop rather than going in and tweaking the colors as we're supposed to. So let's go ahead and show you exactly what this looks like when we push this saturation up a little bit too high. So I'm going to drag this up to about plus 70, and you'll notice when I do that I'm really starting to get some funky tones in here in the skin tones. For instance, I've got this big pink line here. I've got lots of orange lines and splotches everywhere. I'm also getting some really cartoonish looking effects down here on the fingers, and I'm also getting some really oversaturated aspects right here in this green area up here. So what I need to do is figure out a way that I can maintain these nice skin tones while still increasing the overall color of this green grass that's back here in the background. Now you can't really tell that's grass simply because of the depth of field of the shot, but that is grass back there, and I'd like that to be a little bit more of a vibrant green. Well, in the new Camera Raw, there's a great slider called Vibrance that allows you to maintain your skin tones and increase the color values of different areas of your image. So let me go ahead and I'll push this saturation back down to 0. This is exactly where we started when we first opened up this image. And now let me start to drag this vibrance slider to the right here. As I drag this slider here, you're going to notice that I get a significant bump in the colors back in here and the back areas of this field, also up here in this green area up top, but I'm going to be able to maintain these skin tones. So let's push this up to about plus 75. That's even 5 steps farther than we pushed that saturation setting originally, and look how well we have maintained those skin tones both in the face and on this hand over here on the left. So this is an amazing type of edit because of the fact that the vibrance slider always is trained to ignore the skin tones when it's increasing color. So that's going to make it so much easier for you to maintain constant color with your skin tones and still be able to add that extra punch to the rest of your colors in your image. Now let's go ahead now and show you an instance when you would actually use saturation as opposed to the vibrance slider. So now we know where to use the vibrance slider, but the saturation slider, although not as useful as the vibrance slider, is still quite a useful adjustment to be made as a broad overall adjustment to some other images. So I'll go ahead and open up this preview window again, and I'm going to select radiocity.cr2. When I do that, I'm going to bring up this image here, and notice the colors aren't too bad in this image, but they're still just a little muted. So what I want to do is increase these colors inside of this image simply by dragging up the saturation slider here on the right. So I'll go ahead and drag this over, and as I drag that, you'll see here I get more of an enhancement on the reds, and I'm definitely getting a big bump in the blues here, and it's really increasing the overall quality of those colors and really making them punch off the screen. Now if I drag this back and take it back to 0, and then start to drag the vibrance slider, you'll notice I get somewhat of the same effect, but in the fact that it's trained to ignore those skin tones, it's really ignoring most of these yellows down here, and it's also ignoring some of the oranges in this Radio City sign. So I'm having a little bit of trouble getting it to get that full punchy effect that I really want it to have. So in this case, this would be a great example for where you would want to use the saturation versus the vibrance. So let's go ahead and I'll show you again. Here is saturation at, say, plus 50. Let's go ahead and show you that. There's plus 50 for saturation. You see those deep reds and those really deep blues. And we're also getting some enhancement of the music hall sign down here too. Using saturation is really a great way to make overall color adjustments, simply because of the fact that when you're using saturation, it does not ignore any colors at all. The vibrance slider is trained to ignore certain tones, like I said before, such as the ones that are found in skin, which is really going to make it difficult for you to bump up the color areas in images that contain very red portions, such as this neon sign here. So here's plus 50 for the saturation. Let's go ahead and take it back down to 0. And we'll pump up the vibrance here to 50% as well. And once I kick that up to 50, you'll notice here that's not much of a change from the original image at all. So let's go ahead, we'll show you this one more time. Here is the saturation, which really takes those colors up an extra notch. And then if I turn that back down to 0, you see how desaturated they become, how we really lose that punchiness right there in those signs. So now you should be able to recognize when you're working with photographs the different times that you can use vibrance versus saturation.